YouTube, Derek Shoehorn here for Life Advice. Got my morning cup of tea, actually, not coffee today. I thought I'd change it up, and a good old British cup of tea. You gotta change things up during this lockdown period, I think, a bit of variety. You don't want to get stuck in a rut. There is such a thing as a good routine, but then there's a fine line between a routine and a rut. And I don't want to get stuck in a rut, so usually I drink coffee. Today I got a cup of tea, so cheers. I got 3 great questions to get through today. Absolutely inundated with questions right now. It's keeping me busy, it's keeping me busy, giving me something to do. I want to give a shout out before I get started to Yasmin Anti-Freeze, who sent a question about trolling. And I will be addressing that question, but not in today's video. I'm going to do a separate video on the topic of trolling, okay, Yasmin? So keep them peeled for that one. It's going to be great. But with that being said, let's get right into today's questions. Derek, I am 3 years old. Watching your video about the mental health crisis got me thinking about my own situation. A third of my life has now been spent in lockdown. I can deal with the lack of social interaction, but I'm anxious to get back out on the streets and start selling drugs again. Do you have any advice on how I can stay sane in the meantime? And that is from Matilda Cray. Okay, Matilda, well, your age group is actually probably the one that I feel most sorry for during this time. Because even though 3-year-olds such as yourself are some of the least affected by the actual coronavirus, I would argue that you're some of the worst affected by the effects of the lockdown. I don't know, you don't say in your question who you live with, but I'm going to assume that you live with your parents, or at least one parent. And that makes it very tough to run drugs, because the adult drug dealers are fine. I mean, I walk around the streets here in Brighton and there's hundreds of them around. It's pretty much just drug dealers and Deliveroo drivers now. That's all that we have left. So those guys are fine. It's more you kids who are struggling. So I do feel for you in that sense. Now, like I said, I'm going to assume that you live with at least one parent. And the real risk of this time for someone in a situation like yourself in these formative years is that your drug dealing skills could atrophy. What I'm going to recommend is that with the parent that you live with, or whoever it is that you live with, what you want to do is you want to try and persuade them, if you don't have any in the house already, to invest in a lot of vitamin pills and maybe find some monopoly money or use some paper to make some fake money and simply role play drug dealing in the house. And I know that it's not going to be quite the same. It's going to lack a certain something. They're not going to get high, you're not going to get rich. It's not real drugs, not real money. But what it will do is it will just keep you in that mindset and keep your skills sharp for when we are finally allowed out in maybe a year or two. Then you can get back in the game and you hit the ground running. So that's what I'd recommend. Just role play drug dealing in your house with your family. And like I say, I really do feel for you in your situation, and it's 3-year-olds like you who are some of the worst affected by the lockdown. So good luck to you. Let me know if you have any problems implementing that advice, or if you run into any kind of issues with it that I haven't covered here, and we'll come back to it. But thanks for the question, and I hope it helps. Derek, I am a 50-year-old man. Watching your video on the mental health crisis got me thinking about my own situation. I'm starting to think that the days when I could touch women's backs while standing at a crowded bar are gone for good. Can you suggest a lockdown-friendly alternative? And that is from Wayne Lineker. Well, Wayne, I gotta say, this is actually an issue I've never encountered before. I've been doing this life coaching for a very long time now, all my life in fact, and this is in fact the first time that anyone has asked me for advice on something which to my ears sounds kind of creepy. All right, and I didn't want to go with that. I'm not sure if that's just a prejudice of mine, so I've checked with a woman. I asked a woman about this. And what she said was that women actually really do enjoy that when a 50-year-old man touches their back uninvited while waiting at a crowded bar. And she said it's actually one of the most pleasant things going. So I asked her whether this was something that could still happen during the lockdown, given that we don't have crowded bars, we don't have crowded anywhere anymore. And what she said was, yes, it's fine as long as you do it outdoors and as long as you wear a mask, and ideally you want to have a negative COVID test to your name beforehand. Okay? So outdoors, wearing a mask, negative test, then you can just go up to any woman and just kind of rub her back uninvited like you would have done at the crowded bar before. So I hope that helps you, Wayne. I hope that's the answer you wanted, because I would have thought that from your point of view that's good news. Like I say, it's not an issue I've encountered before. I don't really understand it, but that's what this woman I spoke to said. So, who am I to argue? And good luck to you, Wayne. I hope it goes well. Derek, I am a serving police officer. Lately, I've been stopping anyone who is not alone in public and asking them if they live together, and whether they are aware that there's a war on. I'm usually met with either fear or hostility, but sometimes people have the perfectly reasonable excuse that they are in fact a corpse being transported to the morgue. Perfectly reasonable, but as I understand it, still against the law. My question is, in your opinion, should I arrest them or only issue a fine? And that is from PC Karen Brady in Chatham. Well, Karen, it's an interesting question. I'm not an expert on the law. I certainly don't pretend to understand all these new regulations in particular. It's kind of confusing for the best of us. But it does sound to me like those people, although, yes, as you say at first glance, it seems like a reasonable excuse that they're a corpse being transported to the morgue, they're still a vector. They're still a vector is the way I see it. So I think you should probably still come down hard on them. And whether or not you issue a fine or whether you arrest them, it kind of depends on the circumstances, I guess. And, I would imagine actually that you're better placed than I am as a police officer. You see this kind of thing on the ground. I can only speculate, but I think probably if it was down to me, it would depend on the attitude of the corpse. If the corpse showed some awareness that what they were doing was wrong and some contrition, in those circumstances, maybe a fine or even a slap on the wrist would be okay. But if they resist, or if they show any kind of unwillingness to accept what you're arguing, or if they demonstrate any kind of denier type views, then arrest, I'm afraid, would be warranted. That's what I think. But like I say, that's just my opinion. You may well be better placed as a police officer on the ground to deal with that. So I'll leave it in your capable hands. And I'd just like to also take this opportunity to thank the police force for all the great work they're doing at the moment in an extremely tough situation. So thank you to the boys in blue, or boys and girls in black, more accurately. Alright guys, so I hope you took value from that advice, and as I always say, if there are any problems implementing the advice that I give, it's probably your fault. That's the first thing. But secondly, I do like to hear about it sometimes, because even if I only laugh about it, then that's worthwhile in itself. But also, if there's anything I can add that I may well have overlooked in the first instance, or if there was information missing from your question which might change my advice, then I will always do that. So please don't hesitate to get back in touch. Alright, so with all that being said, as usual, keep growing, no cheat days. I'll see you in the next video.